We are live.
Great. Welcome to the weekly meeting of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. I'm joined here with my co-chairman, Senator Peters. Any opening remarks, Mr. Chairman?
Ready to go, Mr. Chair.
All right, we have a pretty robust agenda, so let's get right into it. We'll start with the Capitol Judiciary. Caleb Weiss is our analyst, will give us the analysis. Caleb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Can everyone see the analysis document? Starting on the first page here with the capital budget summary, as you can see, there is 8.1 million programmed in fiscal 2022. That includes money for the new Court of Appeals building, as well as the addition to the Washington County District Court. And you can see both of those here. And that's comprised entirely of general obligation bonds, as you can see down here. Moving on to the capital improvement program, you can see here a bar chart illustrating the 5 years from the current CIP. You can see fiscal 2022 here, and that includes the Court of Appeals building in red and the addition to the Washington County District Court in blue. You can see that the Court of Appeals building has a great deal of program spending in the out years as well. The two additional buildings that don't include funding for in this year, but do in later years are the Shulman building conversion in the purple here and the new Hartford County District Court in the yellow. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the Shulman building conversion in particular, because this is a project that's been going on for a while and there's been numerous changes over the years. As you can see in here in Exhibit 2, this shows the shifting of the project across 3 years of CIPs. So you can see here in the 2019 CIP, most of the spending was supposed to happen by fiscal 2022, but as we move through the 3 years, the spending has continually shifted backwards. And you can also see that the amount has increased, going up to over 50 million in the recent CIP, as you can see here. The main point I wanted to point out was just the deferral of the Shulman building conversion, and it's not ready yet to receive construction funding. And then as far as actions that we had, we're just recommending to approve the bond funds for both the Washington County District Court as well as the new Court of Appeals building. So thank you.
Thank you, Caleb, for the analysis. Any questions for our analyst? Don't see any. Chair Peters, I don't think anybody from your side. All right, well, seeing no questions, we are proud to be joined today by our Chief Judge, Judge Barbera from the Court of Appeals, as well as our Chief Judge from the District Court, Judge Morrissey. It's great to see you both and welcome.
Thank you. I have unmuted myself. Was that a timely maneuver on my part, Senator Peters? I hope I didn't rush in. Good afternoon, Chairman Peters and Barnes, Vice Chairman Zucker and Chang, and members of the Capital Budget Senate and House subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to respond to this year's capital budget recommendations. As we know, your time is always precious, and particularly these days. This year, our response will be short and it will be positive. We concur with all of the recommendations. We appreciate the governors having included these recommendations in the proposed capital budget and hope you will give them favorable consideration as well. Now, we are certainly prepared to review the recommendations, or if you prefer, simply to answer any question you may have.
Okay, as Judge Morrissey, do you have anything to add, or?
I just echo what Chief Judge Barbera said. It's a concur on all recommendations.
Great. Well, thanks to you both. And we appreciate all the work you've done, especially during COVID and keeping our courts upright. So thanks for all your work. Are there questions for our judges? I don't see any. So thanks. That was quick. Thank you very much.
Yes. And again, let me thank each and every one of you once again for your careful consideration to our recommendations and to the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Delegate Barnes.
Thank you.
Senator Peters.
All right, so we will turn to the Department of Aging. We have Grace Peterson is our analyst. Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see that? Okay, so it's my pleasure to present the Department of Aging's fiscal 2022 capital analysis. The Department of Aging administers the Senior Center Capital Grants Program. As you can see in this table, the amount authorized in fiscal 2020, 2021, and 2022 has been below the programmed 1.6 million for this program. This has been the case for 4 of the 5 most recent years, suggesting the program is underutilized. When the program is used, the requests are frequently for facility renewal with an established history of interrupted service. This raises concerns about the degree that local governments are budgeting for the life cycle replacement of these important building systems. In addition, 1.1 million of the program's funds authorized in prior years remain unencumbered, while most of the program's funding from prior years is unexpended. 6.2 million of the program's authorized 7.3 million. 800,000 of that unexpended balance is from 2015. So DLS requests the agency comment whether those funds will be expended before the authorization expires. 3 projects are funded in the fiscal 2022 authorization. $800,000 is for the Severn Intergenerational Center. This will be a new senior center. And this $800,000 grant is in addition to a 1 million grant that was received external to this program. The Edgemere Senior Center receives a $250,000 grant through this program for an HVAC replacement. And the Overlea Fullerton Senior Center receives a $55,000 grant through the program in fiscal 2022. Given the program's underutilization and increasing use for facility renewal projects, DLS recommends adopting this narrative on an update on program administration and outreach. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much for the analysis. Are there any questions for our analyst? I don't see any. Thank you so much, Grace. We will turn, oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just had a quick question for Ms. Peterson, if I could, Pedersen.
Yeah, I think Senator Peters recognized you. Yep, Delegate Griffith.
Thank you. My question is, I just wasn't sure about this program. Are there any matching requirements for the jurisdictions that use this, the funds for the senior program?
There is. Local governments must provide an equal match to the state grant, and the state grant has a maximum of $800,000 over a 15-year period.
Okay, so some sort of like some of the other capital programs that we have, like the libraries and others, have a modified grant based on sort of the, you know, the funding levels that the school construction funding matches are. So this is not one that has been adjusted. Is that's what I'm understanding?
Yes, it's a completely equal match.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. I don't see any other questions, just looking around. So we will move to the department. We are joined by Secretary Kramer and her team. Madam Secretary, it's great to see you as always. Our favorite Kramer, I know. So welcome.
Good afternoon, but Secretary Kramer is not on the line today, sir.
All right, well, Ms. Weaver, welcome to you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to thank you all. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to Delegate McIntosh. Thank you to everyone on the committee today for allowing myself and my colleague, Chief of Staff Pam Seidel, to represent. Unfortunately, Secretary Kramer had another engagement, so it was a conflict, but she does send her thank you and her regrets. We actually concur with the recommendations in the report, and that's pretty much it. We agree with it.
All right, well, that's simple. Any questions for the department? I don't see any. So thank you, Ms. Weaver. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
And we'll move on to
Thank you.
University of Maryland Medical System. And we have Ann Wagner, our analyst here. Ann?
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and walk through the analysis. Okay, so for fiscal 22, the University of Maryland Medical System receives a total of $14.5 million in GO bonds across 2 projects. Both of these projects are at the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore City. The first project includes a 9-story addition to the North Tower of the Comprehensive Cancer Center and Organ Transplant Center to support more clinical programs. This project also includes constructing a new ambulatory care center as a completely new building, and it also expands parking on an existing garage. This project is estimated to cost $294 million total, with the state's contribution currently set at $125 million. I'll note that there was language in last year's capital budget expressing legislative intent that the state's contribution total $175 million, but that is not currently planned in the CIP. As I said, it's currently at $125 million. So $12 million in GO bonds scheduled in fiscal 22 supports the design and construction phases of this project. The project did experience about a 6-month delay due to the medical center limiting capital-related meetings early on in the pandemic. And this was done to limit people coming in and out of the hospital early on in the pandemic. So this delay does contribute to a change in the funding schedule. So from this chart, the striped bars show the spending plan in last year's CIP, and the solid bars show this year's planned spending in the CIP. The blue bars are state funding, and then the orange bars are the medical system's contributions. So far, the state contribution has been in line with the CIP from last year, but then you're seeing the medical system's contributions falling below what was planned last year. It's been outpaced by about $6 million compared to what was planned through fiscal 21. In fiscal 22, as a result, you're seeing state funding being deferred slightly, and you're seeing more GO bonds in fiscal 25 and 26 than what was planned on these striped bars. This shift is partially due to the delays in the project, so it does push total construction costs to fiscal 25 and 26, as you're seeing these total bars outpacing the planned spending in last year's CIP. However, shifting GO bonds to the later fiscal years also does realign the system's contributions to be more in line with the state, as you're seeing the contribution being more from the state, at least in these first few years. So then I'll move on to the second project. This is for the Shock Trauma Center. This exhibit shows the components of this project. Construction on these infrastructure upgrades will begin in the current fiscal year, with total project completion scheduled for fall of 2024. This project also saw a 6-month delay for the same reason as the one before, which was due to the pandemic. They didn't want people coming in and out of the hospital for planning these capital projects. So there is a 6-month delay here too. In fiscal 22, $2.5 million in GO bonds are budgeted, and total planned spending next year will support, the 4 components in the middle of this exhibit. So fiscal 22 spending, both from the UMS contribution and the state contribution, will support these 4 items that will, continue beyond 23, but at least in 22, some of that funding is supporting each of these components. So like with the Cancer Center project, the UMS contribution has been lower than expected through fiscal 21. Again, this is the striped bars show last year's CIP, and the solid bars show this year's CIP. Last year's CIP anticipated $7.7 million in UMS funding, but then in this year, you're seeing that only the state funding has been authorized for this project. The non-state spending budgeted in fiscal 22 and planned for 23 catches up with this slightly. You're seeing that in last year's CIP, UMS's contribution was scheduled to be a little bit less. And then these solid orange bars show that the new CIP plans for more of UMS's contribution here. Again, you're seeing that the state funding has been deferred slightly. The last year's CIP had planned for about $5 million going to this project, but this year only $2.5 million is authorized, and then the $2.5 million is deferred to fiscal 24. And so this is showing also the fact that the project was delayed. So that's why some of this construction funding is shown in the out years. Ultimately, the DLS recommendations are to approve the $14.5 million in GO bonds, and that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Ann. Are there questions for the analyst? I don't see anybody waving their hand, so thank you, Ann. We'll turn to the department. I think we're joined by Vice President Doyle and her team, if I'm correct.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Karen Doyle. I'm Senior Vice President for the Shock Trauma Center. And I have my partner with me, Leonard Taylor, who will just speak on the Cancer Center. But on behalf of University of Maryland Medical Center, we are grateful for Ms. Wagner's analysis. And as the Shock Trauma Center, we are truly appreciative of the state support of our continued investment and our innovation and upgrades to the Shock Trauma Center. I think, you know, we serve about 8,000 citizens of the state of Maryland and appreciate your unending support. So Leonard.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And I want to echo the thanks that my colleague Karen Doyle offered with special recognition of Terry Garrity and Katie Bryan and the rest of the DBM team who've been great partners, certainly with us as long as I've been with the University of Maryland Medical System, which is now going on 17 years. And also a thank you to Matt Klein and of course, Ms. Wagner. We do appreciate the work that our state colleagues are doing on our behalf and on behalf of the citizens of Maryland. And we do concur with the recommendations in the report. I did want to just mention, because both of these projects represent major portions of our mission to the citizens of Maryland and to the region. I want to make sure that I remind you that the Greenbaum Cancer Center, which is a comprehensive cancer center recognized under the National Institutes of Cancer, has been serving the citizens of Maryland for many, many years. Its mission is to undertake innovative, basic clinical and population research that will impact the understanding and treatment of cancer around the world and provide state-of-the-art cancer care to patients in Maryland and beyond. We also have a huge training mission, and we're extremely proud that we also lead cancer education and training efforts for the University of Maryland. And we serve a diverse catchment area that includes urban African-American populations and take great pride in the diversity of our clinical trials. The project before you is actually going to help us because we've been a victim of our own success. And we have far outgrown the facilities that we currently occupy. Our clinical volumes have roughly tripled in the last 15 years, and our facilities have not kept pace. And so that's why this project and the shock trauma project that we're also, Karen and I are prepared to answer questions on, are so very, very important to our mission. And we deeply appreciate the ongoing state support. Thank you. We're available to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, well, thank you both for your presentation. Are there any questions for the hospital medical system? I don't see any, so thank you both very much. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure.
Thank you. Returning to the Department of Agriculture, Andrew Gray is our analyst. Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll now present the Maryland Department of Agriculture's fiscal 22 capital budget analysis. So the Maryland Department of Agriculture has two programs you should be seeing on your screen right now, the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program and the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program. So for fiscal 22, there's $45.5 million for the Agricultural Land Preservation Program and $5 million for the Cost Share Program. In terms of the capital budget changes between 21 and 22, you see it's primarily a decrease in the transfer tax special funds. This will be discussed a little bit further in the Department of Natural Resources PAYGO budget. Basically reflects the fact that money is being used in fiscal 22 general obligation bond funding, which you see is increasing here, $31 million to provide for the program. And then that would allow for an equivalent amount of money being transferred to the general fund in order to help the state's fiscal situation. So that's a major change for the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program. For the MAX program, you see there's a $3 million decrease in funding between the 2 years, $8 million decreasing to $5 million in fiscal 22. So the MAL programs comprised of the $6 million in transfer tax special funds that are remaining in the budget, $8.5 million in special funds, from the local participation, and then the $31 million in general obligation bonds is replacement amount for the transfer tax special funds that once again being transferred. This would allow for the preservation of 11,978 acres. Just a brief note there that MALF has looked to include federal funding in recent years, but is still having difficulty working with the federal government on an agreement that kind of meets everybody's needs. And so that's an ongoing consideration. For the Maryland Agricultural Cost Share Program, the allowance includes $5 million, which is once again a $3 million decrease between the 2 years. MDA does note that it has increased number of best management practices that is working on for work for Chesapeake Bay restoration purposes. And then Exhibit 2 here reflects the fact that they've been able to encumber and expend a lot of the prior year funding. In terms of the one update to be, or one of the two updates to be discussed here, the agricultural land preservation goal was set by Senate Joint Resolution 10 of 2002. It established a statewide local land preservation goal to triple the number of acres of agricultural land to 1,030,000 acres. It's not likely that we're going to reach that goal by 22, as we're at around 829,491 acres, with the inclusion of the Maryland Environmental Trust acreage, which is not actually part of the original legislation. However, legislation has been introduced in the 21 session that would establish that same goal, but for the 2030 time period, moving that goal a little bit further up. In terms of the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program, the program is still delayed. This is a program that would work with the federal government to provide for areas around bases, federal military bases, that could then use federal money to provide for easement purchases. So that's still ongoing work due to the Navy staffing change. The Maryland Department of Agriculture hopefully is going to get there soon. In terms of the recommended actions, on the PAYGO side is to concur with the governor's allowance, and similarly on the general obligation bond side is to concur with the two authorizations there as well. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thanks for your analysis, Andrew. Are there any questions for Mr. Gray? I don't see any hands. Anyone? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. We'll turn to the department. I think we're joined by Secretary Bartenfelder. If not, his team or Mr. Secretary, you can jump right in.
This is Eric Von Paris. I'm the Assistant Secretary for Administration for the department. I know we're being joined as well by Michelle Cable. Michelle is the Director of the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Program, and Assistant Secretary Hans Schmidt is here representing the MAX program. There were no specific questions in the analysis, and the department concurs with both the PAYGO and the GO bond recommendations set forth in the analysis.
All right, nice and easy. Any questions for Department of Agriculture? I don't see any. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, our final department today is going to be Department of Natural Resources. I think that is also Andrew Gray. So welcome back, Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll now present the Maryland Department of Natural Resources' Fiscal 22 Grant and Loan Program Capital Program. You see there are 9 programs reflected here, Fiscal 22 funding. In terms of the big picture, let's just discuss a little bit more extensively in the capital budget overview. Just a real highlight here, the governor's plan is to include around $100.6 million in general obligation bond funding in the capital budget. This is funding that's usually provided in transfer tax special funds. That, through a BRFA recommendation or through a BRFA provision that the governor has, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, allows the governor to transfer the $100.6 million in transfer tax special funds to the general fund. So Department of Legislative Services has looked at that overall $100.6 million in transfer tax programs that are funded with general obligation bonds, is recommending that the $34 million in particular for program open space stateside be reduced. That provides for $34 million that can be repurposed in the GO bond capital budget. But that means that there's $34 million that the governor is then not allowed to transfer in special funds to the general fund. Therefore, there's a second provision that DLS recommends that would actually require that $34 million transfer of special funds to the general fund in order to comply with the governor's overall program of $100.6 million going to the general fund. And then once again, having the $34 million in funding being available for other GO bond projects. In terms of in fiscal 22, what's happening with the transfer tax, the governor has delayed the overall transfer tax repayment program, reducing by $43.9 million the amount that's budgeted for fiscal 22. That's a contingent reduction. So as long as there's a repayment plan change, then the governor's plan is to then reduce this amount in fiscal 22 because the governor plans on replacing that money in the out years. And it looks sort of like this. So in the 2021 session, which is the gray line, the governor still plans to get that $242.2 million. He's just shifting it out yet again in terms of when that repayment would occur. The Department of Legislative Services has looked at this and recommends that that repayment plan be eliminated. Therefore, the funding not be provided going forward. In terms of the estimated transfer tax allocations to capital programs, you see an increase here in the funding to those capital programs from the transfer tax revenues as the years go by. And there's also program open space balances in both the program open space state and local side as well. In terms of that recommendation, once again, is to eliminate the transfer tax repayment program and then to reduce by $34 million the general obligation bond funding or POS state that can be repurposed, and then to provide for a BRFA recommendation to require that $34 million in special funds to be transferred to the general fund. Revenue estimate changes for the transfer tax, it goes down a little bit in 21, but then you see increases relative to what was planned previously for the revenue estimate. In terms of the overall capital program for the Department of Natural Resources, you see the shift from 22 to 23 is really the general obligation bonds. So that's the bond funding that's come in to replace the transfer tax special funds, and therefore you see an increase in bond funding in fiscal 22 that then decreases in 23. And then similarly for the transfer tax special funds, you see an increase from the 80 million to 194.6, reflecting the transfer tax funding coming back in. The out years reflects the transfer tax repayments as provided for under the governor's plan. Under the program highlights, just focus really quickly here that the blue section here is the general obligation bond funding that's replacing the transfer tax funds. You can see that in a number of programs kind of going across here. And the biggest funding for the project for natural resource development funds, the Albert Powell Fish Hatchery Project. In terms of the one update in the analysis, just discuss the Natural Resources Development Fund and Critical Maintenance Program, Capital Improvement Program. So as requested in the 2020 Joint Chairman's Report, the report was provided. It really just reflected the fact that there's one major project in the kind of out years in, well, for fiscal 22, excuse me, and then for all those years really, it's the $8.7 million for the Albert Powell Fish Hatchery Project. In terms of the pre-authorizations in the fiscal 22 capital budget, there's a fiscal 23 pre-authorization of $4.5 million for the Johnson Wildlife Management Area and Hillsborough Natural Resources Police Shooting Range Improvements Project to allow for the completion and construction of the second shooting range in fiscal 2023. The recommendation is to concur with the governor's allowance for the PAYGO funding, and then for the GEO bond recommended actions to concur with everything for the program open space, $34 million in GEO bonds. The recommendation once again is to reduce that amount. And then for the BRFA recommendations to eliminate the repayment requirement for the transfer tax repayment plan. And then once again, the $34 million GEO bond replacement funding, that money would then, there's a separate requirement, BRFA provision to transfer that money to the general fund because of how the BRFA actions work. If there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
All right, thank you, Andrew. We're somewhat familiar with these recommendations from the capital overview briefing that we had. But are there any questions for Andrew on this analysis? Okay, I don't hear anyone. So Andrew, thank you very much. We can now turn to the department. I do know that I saw here my former committee mate, Secretary Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio. Madam Secretary, always great to see you and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to both chairs and both vice chairs and members of both of the committees. For the record, Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and with me today is our Acting Deputy Secretary, Alan Fisher. We want to start by thanking Mr. Gray and DLS for the analysis and the work that they've done, and also thank the committees for the opportunity to respond. So regarding the PAYGO recommendation action, we concur with the DLS recommendation. And regarding the GEO bond recommended actions, we concur with all of the recommendations except for recommendation number 3. And we also respectfully disagree with the corresponding BRFA recommendation. So just going to recommendation number 3 and the BRFA recommendation, which affect program open space. As you all are probably aware, outdoor recreation and open space have been in extremely high demand. And in fact, we've recorded a record 21.5 million visitors last year, which is much more than the 14.9 million record that we had previously. Local and county parks and playgrounds are experiencing the same thing, and all indications are that this trend will continue. Equally as important to outdoor recreation is the fact that land conservation is a very key component to implementing the Phase 3 watershed implementation plan and achieving our Bay Agreement goals, particularly the increased load from climate change. And as outlined in the JCR report that we share each year on Chesapeake Bay restoration financing, fully funding program open space is a key strategy to ensuring that we have proper financing for restoration of the Bay. So I know that Mr. Gray did mention some of the unencumbered balance in the POS fund. I would just point out that we are getting projects in on a weekly basis in our pipeline. For example, we have 14 acquisitions with accepted offers right now. We have 10 projects that have extended offers, and we have 29 projects that are in the appraisal phase. So all of the steps that we have taken to get more aggressive in land acquisition are paying off. And without having an appropriate level of fund balance, we will not be able to successfully implement those programs. Also, reducing the repayment will affect more than just program open space stateside. It would also affect program open space local, the Rural Legacy Program, critical maintenance, and of course, Maryland Park Service overall. And with that, we are happy to answer any questions that the committee members may have.
All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. Are there questions for the department? I don't see any, so thank you so much, Madam Secretary. It's great to see you.
Thank you, you too. Thank you
We do
very
have,
much.
thank you. Have a great day. We do have some witnesses here on this this budget. We have Jim Bass. So if you're here, Jim, now's the time. Welcome. And I will remind witnesses have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, chairs and members of the committee. My name is Jim Bass. I am the Coastal Resilience Program Manager at Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, and I'm here today to encourage support for the funding of program open space. Over the past year, the impacts of coronavirus, rate of park visitation and interest in public lands has skyrocketed, as Secretary Hadaway-Riccio has noted. The trend is expected to continue as families across Maryland build ties with the natural areas which surround us. Program open space is critical for providing this access to the public. As our nation increasingly grapples with issues of equity and justice, we are continually reminded that opportunities to access public lands and parks remain significantly lower for people of color, and we need funding sources like program open space to address these issues within our communities. My organization, Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, has launched a major initiative called Delmarva Oasis, aimed at significantly increasing conservation on the Eastern Shore. In order to achieve the goal of Delmarva Oasis of protecting 50% of the Delmarva Peninsula by the year 2030, we need to fully utilize every available tool in the toolbox. Program open space is among the most valuable tools for conservation and preservation in Maryland. Thank you all for your time and for your support of program open space.
Thank you so much, Jim. Any questions for Mr. Bass? Okay, seeing none. We have Tim Casey, and Tim will be followed by Stephen Green. So Stephen, if you're ready after Tim. Tim, you're on.
Thank you, Chairman Barnes and Chairman Peters. A few things. I'm Tim Casey with the Friends of Maryland State Parks. In terms of support, we support program open space full funding, and we please would ask you not to cut any of the departments and funding sources for the Maryland State Parks, including the operating budget, critical maintenance, and capital improvement funding. Secretary Riccio did discuss the 21 million visitors last year in recreation and people getting the parks during the COVID crisis. However, one note is we had 10 million visitors back in 2013 and steadily up to the 14.9 in 2019. So that's a 50% increase even without COVID. And of course, the jump to COVID was quite astounding with tremendous pressure on frontline staff, rangers, and field staff. 2 points. One is on the critical maintenance. We saw Mr. Gray's analysis on the backlog. I have a slightly different number. I've got 64.8 rather than his 63, but maybe we won't quibble over that. But that's a 60% increase, over what was in 2018. I did an analysis of the trend of the last 4 years of what had been allocated to the parks in critical maintenance. Totaled $42 million from FY19 through FY 2022. Of that 42, they got to spend 13. So that's less than 1/3 of the allocation that was being allowed to spend. With all the visitation, Chairman, we must find a way to support the parks better and fill this backlog and reduce it over time. On the capital improvement funding budget, however, these are just projects being deferred and moved out. And there's several critical ones I won't mention, but some historical sites and certain campgrounds and so forth in parks are not being repaired as they should be according to the funding that and projects that are in the capital improvement funding if you look back in history. So all these projects are just simply there and moving out in time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Next, we have Stephen Green, followed by Shantae Daniels. Stephen?
Hello, thank you to the members of the Senate and House Capital Budget Subcommittees for the opportunity to testify in support of the program Open Space in the 22 budget. I'm Steve Green, owner of High Mountain Sports in Deep Creek Lake in Garrett County. I'm a founding member and treasurer of Garrett Trails, a trail nonprofit. Garrett Chamber Visitor Center board member. I was also a commissioner. I was on the Maryland Outdoor Recreation Economic Commission. My business, High Mountain Sports, is a member of the Grassroots Outdoor Alliance and the Snow Sports Merchandising Corporation, both national retailers group. So I'm here to ask for full funding of the program Open Space. Outdoor recreation, even before the pandemic, was on an increase. And the pandemic has brought what I call a super-induced demand for outdoor recreation. My staff in my store is worn out because we've just been overwhelmed for people that have wanted to get into the outdoors. It's been pretty awesome, but it's been tiring. My business in Garrett County depend on state parks and state forests and the projects funded by program Open Space. Garrett Trails, our trails nonprofit, has used heritage funds for big and small trail projects. And one thing, we also want to think of this program Open Space as a mental health initiative. And this last year, we've realized a lot of these projects program Open Space have helped were critical in mental health relief valve. People needed to get outside and move. So Maryland outdoor recreation needs to be supported by a program Open Space. Thank you to the members of the Senate and House Capital Budget Subcommittees for the opportunity to testify in support of program Open Space. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony and being with us today. Any questions for Mr. Green? Okay, well, thank you, sir. We have our local Garrett County delegate. I thought he might want to.
Yeah, I raised my hand there. I didn't know you catch it, Mr.
Sorry,
Chairman.
Delegate Beitzel, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Green, or Steve, as I know him, I know you've been very active and about everything you can think of concerning issues surrounding Deep Creek Lake and with the PRB. And I think you're very familiar with the needs for sediment and erosion control around the lake and critical maintenance. So there are several coves that there have been attempts and we're looking at the dredging some of those coves and working on an active project. Could you maybe enlighten the committee a little bit about the need for those resources to enable us to move forward with those sediment erosion control issues and dredging if it proves to be successful?
Sure. So as you know, Garrett County, Deep Creek Lake had a ton of visitors this year because going out in the boat and visiting the lake was a great thing to do during the pandemic. Deep Creek Lake is a man-made lake. Man-made lakes eventually fill in. So there's been a project proposed for the Arrowhead Cove pilot project. There's been a $1 million proposed by the state with looking for another $1 million match to finish off this project. So there's looking for ways. It's a naturally occurring process, as well as all other kind of issue, sediment coming in from the different coves, farms, things like that. So it's a highlight of the Properties Owner Association. There's something they want to see. The Watershed Foundation is in full support of this also.
And also, Mr. Chair, if I could follow up just a little bit, and Secretary Jeannie Hadaway Riccio is very familiar with Senator Edwards and I have been really trying to push DNR to provide for more facilities and more utilization of the state lands and state-owned lands out in Western Maryland. And I think about 4,000 acres of the preservation lands that have taken place across the state have been out in Western Maryland. And just recently, the DNR has provided for additional trails along in the Deep Creek Lake State Park. And I know from the visitors coming up there that that's really being utilized for mountain biking and sports and stuff. Steve, I think maybe you were instrumental in those trails that have been added over at the state park and Meadow Mountain Trail and others. Do you want to speak to the need for continued support of expansion of those trails?
Sure. I mean, every study that comes out, the demand for trails is one of the top 5 things that people are looking at. So the DNR got the International Mountain Bike Association to build some trails at Deep Creek State Park. And there are somewhere between 10 to 15 miles of new trails, relatively new, and they were just overwhelmingly received. You can just see the cars coming into town because of those trails now with bikes in the car. You can kind of see those folks because they're not your run-of-the-mill bikes. And those trails were just their first rate. With the bikes, when you're over there now, you're just seeing all kinds of families out hiking on the trails. The Meadow Mountain Trail, which we used a lot of heritage funds for, it's got one of the best overlooks in the state of Maryland, but that's my opinion. And that's on the Continental Divide. So that trail, which is in state forest land and University of Maryland, is going to be a prized asset to the county as we finish and continue to develop that project.
All right, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to ask those questions.
Sure, no problem. Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Steve, for being with us. We are next joined by Shante Daniels, followed by John Hastings. Ms. Daniels, welcome. I know she was here just 1 minute ago. I saw her on the screen. Tell you what, oh, I think you're muted, Ms. Daniels. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shante Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of the Baltimore National Heritage Area. Thank you for your time and your governance of the great state of Maryland. Today, I'm representing the Maryland Heritage Area Coalition, comprised of 13 heritage areas in Maryland, funded through program Open Space. The Maryland Heritage Area Program and program Open Space funding has never been more important. Our heritage areas are about place, about culture, history, and the people of those specific places. Maryland has a unique history like no other, from the indigenous to the settlers arriving in St. Mary's County, to the enslaved people brought here to work the fields. Well, we tell the stories of the Chesapeake Bay, the heroes and the heroines of war. There's no place like Maryland. We must preserve and conserve the history for our children and their children. Maryland Heritage Areas and its partners are responsible for preserving our built history as well as the stories that interprets American history. In another 250 years, as we prepare to commemorate 400 years, what we preserve now will tell the story of us and who we are as a people. With COVID-19 crisis, the open spaces, trails like the Patapsco Valley Greenway, the shores of the Bay to Beaches Heritage Area, or the mountain range in Mountain Maryland Gateway to the West Heritage Area provided a safe opportunity for residents and visitors alike. We can all agree these are challenging times. This program has continued to provide employment opportunities, and economic resources to the state. We are requesting at this time that you continue supporting and fully funding program open space. Funded at $6 million through the restricted program open space funding, over $5 million of that funding goes directly back to the counties of Maryland in the form of grants. The statewide economic impact of $6 million is $2.4 million, with $319 million in annual tax revenue, state and local, with over 33,000 jobs supported and maintained. Baltimore City alone contributes $60.9 million in annual revenues, state and local, with more than 6,400 jobs supported and sustained. As we address the issues of inequality and social justice of the past year, everyone is aware that American history is at the crossroads. We must address the narratives that are written, by whom and for whom. This funding will allow us to continue to do this work for the benefit of everyone. Thank you again for your time and your continued support. Stay safe and be well. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Any questions for this witness? I don't see any, so thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
We have Josh Hastings, followed by our last witness is Mark Conway. Mr. Hastings, you're up.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it. My name is Josh Hastings. I'm with the Forever Maryland Foundation. You have my written testimony, so I'll be brief and just say that we support the current state budget funding and strongly ask that you reject the Department of Legislative Services recommendation to eliminate the approximately $218 million payback of previously diverted transfer tax funds. Program Open Space, as you know, is a dedicated funding source, only 0.5% of every real estate transaction, and was specifically designed to help keep pace with green space, preserving green space in addition to development while development's happening. Our Program Open Space has been modeled across the state, and it really should be supported in an even greater amount. I should say, Rural Legacy program. I was actually on the Rural Legacy Advisory Committee for a couple of years, and have seen firsthand what this can do. This program alone, with inside of Program Open Space, does more than just preserve the land. It actually is helpful for supporting local foods, helping save critical plant and animal species. It allows for climate resilience and a lot of other work. You've already heard Secretary Hadaway Riccio and others say this is the biggest year we've ever had for visitation of local state parks. Maryland state parks had double the visitors. Obviously this is really important. Open space is important for immensely important for mental and physical health benefits. I've spent a lot of the last decade working with local land trusts and have seen how local land trusts work with landowners that are on the ground to match these funds with private funds and with federal funds and others. So I'll close it out by basically saying, also bring it to your attention, there was a poll, a recent poll that was done by the Partners for Open Space only 1 month ago, and found out that 90% of Maryland residents support Program Open Space, and more than 3 in 5 individuals are opposed to diverting the funds for other uses. So it continues to have very strong support among the public. I ask that you do please reject the DLS recommendations, and thank you again for all the great work you all do. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day. We're turning to our final witness, Mark Conway. Mark, if you're here, unmute yourself and you are on. Okay, well, I don't see him.
I see him here and he is not muted, but for some reason we can't hear him.
Mark, we're just going to give you another few seconds here to get the technological issues straight, and then we'll have to move on. I'm sorry. There he is. Sir, you're up. We can see you. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Welcome.
Excellent. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, Chair Peters, and Vice Chair Zucker. Good afternoon, members of the House and Senate Capital Budget Subcommittees. My name is Mark Conway. I am the Vice President of the Chesapeake Conservancy, and I'm a councilman representing Baltimore City's 4th District. On behalf of the Chesapeake Conservancy, I would like to express our strong support for Maryland's program Open Space. As you may know, land use in Maryland has an enormous impact on the health of the Chesapeake Bay, which we've been working so hard for decades to clean up and to restore. By supporting land conservation, whether through state parks, local parks, forests, farms, or other open space, program Open Space contributes to our efforts to clean up the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. This also means clean water and clean air for Marylanders. On a larger scale, investing in the protection of forested areas and wetlands will greatly benefit Maryland's climate resiliency efforts. Program Open Space is the most important land protection tool in the state of Maryland. When it created Program Open Space, the Maryland General Assembly was clear in its intent to create a dedicated fund for conservation to protect Maryland's natural resources and to give the public the opportunity to recreate outdoors. This mission has never been more important than today. And given the climate crisis, the health of the Chesapeake, and the need for open space, we cannot divert from this mission. I urge the committees to support full funding for Program Open Space and to reject the DLS recommendation to reduce this funding. I also urge the committees to adopt the Program Open Space repayment plan as outlined in the governor's budget. And lastly, on a personal note, I can attest to the great importance of this program. My family and I are frequent visitors to Patterson Park, Druid Hill Park, and other parks in Baltimore, and having time outside during this pandemic has been absolutely essential for our family. Thank you, and I urge your continued support.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us. Any questions from the committee? Okay, I don't hear any. Have a great day, sir. Mr. Chairman, Chair Peters, any closing remarks from you?
Great meeting, Mr. Chair. That's
All right.
it.
Well, thank you so much to the members, our analysts, and our guests today. We will see you all next week. We're adjourned. Thank you.